Wagwan. Welcome to another episode of Design to Win. I'm your host, Ruth Taylor, and this is a program where we give you the roadmap to win at life with a little Caribbean flavor. And of course, I'm from the island of Jamaica. Coming up on today's show is an interesting episode. It's a solo episode, and I'm going to be talking about winning after loss, lessons we can learn from the book of Ruth, and we're looking at how Ruth and Naomi, especially Naomi, was able to win after multiple losses. And this is a season that we have worldwide lost many persons. I personally am going through a season of multiple losses, and I want to address that and talk about it. So the book of Ruth is one of the oldest books in the Bible, written more than well over 1,000 years ago, right? And within the book of Ruth itself, we are seeing how love prevails within a time of anarchy, despite the customs of the day. So one of the things about Ruth is that this is a story that has been immortalized. And I am struck by it because nobody really knows who wrote this book. It is said that it might have been Samuel, the prophet Samuel, the priest Samuel, but nobody knows for sure who really wrote this book. But it's beautiful, and it is said that the lead character was probably male, whose dedication to female lead characters reveals the women who helped him shape this story. So Ruth is the struggles of one Jewish widow and her daughter-in-law, who is also a widow. So in the story, we are told that there was a famine in Israel. Naomi and her husband, with their two children, left to the land of Moab. And incidentally, the Moabites and the Israelites were normally at odds. And Moab at that time was experiencing plenty, and Israel a time of famine. And so Elimelech and his wife left and they went to Moab. Now it says that shortly after they settled and made lives for themselves in Moab, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and Naomi's name means pleasant. And so she was left in the care of her two sons, who each married a Moabite woman, one named Ruth and the other Orpah. And they lived together for 10 years. At the end of those 10 years, Mahlon and Chilion also died. So Naomi was left alone without her husband and two sons. Now that's hard. You're talking maybe about 12 years. Within a 12-year span, you've lost your children and your husband. That is immeasurable grief. And many of you, it's not even that time span, but because of COVID, you've lost family members. I was speaking with someone 2 weeks ago, and he said, within a week or so, 8 deaths. And I myself, I'm seeing that trend. I've lost a friend to cancer, a friend and young pastor was murdered. And some folks that I admire, whom I consider to be leading Christian men and women, they have also died. And maybe if I check, it's about 5 or 6 losses in the space of a month. And so many persons are grieving. And grief can make you bitter. And so Naomi, having suffered all of this, and then she heard that Israel was doing well again. The season had changed. Word reached her in Moab that God had once again brought life back to the land of Israel and blessed his people with food. She prepared to go back with her two daughters-in-law. And they had a good relationship, and that is good. But while on the journey, Naomi said to them, No, go back. You must both return to Moab. Go to your mother's care and your people. May the Eternal show his loyalty and love to you. I hope he will bring new husbands and that you will find the rest you deserve in your home. So she kissed them, turned them away. But Orpah and Ruth wailed. I mean, Ruth chapter 1, sobbed, crying out to her. And they said, do not leave us. We insist you take us to live with you and your people. And look at Naomi's response. And her response has always ministered to me. She said, go back to your homes, my daughters. What possible reason would you have for returning with me? Do you think I have more sons inside me? Will you marry these unborn sons? Listen, my daughters, and go back. I am too old. I will not marry again because I cannot conceive. But even if I could, if I still believed there was hope for me, if I had a husband and conceived tonight, would you waste your life waiting for them to grow up? Would you let this hope for the future keep you from remarrying? Of course not, my dear daughters. It is obvious that the Eternal has acted against me. My life is much too bitter for you to share with me. At that, Orpah said, okay, I'm going to go back home. But Ruth said, stop pushing me away, insisting that I stop following you. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will also die and be buried near you. May God punish me, and even more so if anything besides death comes between us. When Naomi heard this and saw Ruth's resolve, she stopped trying to talk her out of returning to Judah. The two women went on together to Bethlehem. The news of their arrival spread throughout Bethlehem. And people said, could this really be Naomi? And she said, don't call me Naomi ever again, for I am no longer pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter, for I am filled with bitterness because the highest one has treated me bitterly. I left this place full in spite of the famine, but God has brought me back empty from a plentiful land. Why would you call me pleasant when the Eternal has testified against me and the highest one has brought disaster upon me? Now, the time when they returned was the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, a lot can be said out of that. What possible reason would you guys have to come with me? Seeing the trouble that, in other words, Naomi was bitter and it's as if she felt like she was cursed and that God's hand was against her. And when we go through loss and multiple losses, when the ones who matter most to us go, that's how we feel. We feel as if God is against us. So how do we move on from that? You would have to read the rest of the story, but for those of us who know the story, it turned out that Naomi, because of Ruth's support, Ruth was also a widow, she was mourning. She lost her husband after 10 years. She's an immigrant moving to a land that her people are hated, but she is doing this because she wants to take care of her mother-in-law. Despite Naomi being in a bitter season, grief, Ruth still saw something admirable and was willing to sacrifice it all. Wow, that is just amazing. So one of the first lessons I believe in terms of winning after loss is having support. For you to overcome the loss, you need to have support. And the thing is that we can learn from this is that sometimes you don't want the support, because here we find Naomi refusing to get support. She wanted to go it alone. So I believe one of the ways to recover from loss is not to go it alone and not to reject support. Get support. Don't refuse support, because within that support can become your healing and your deliverance. So Ruth was willing to take care of Naomi despite her own grief. Naomi was older. So in the season as people are going through and grieving, ask yourself, how could I be of support? How could I lend a helping hand to somebody who is going through loss and grief? What could I do? One of the simple things Ruth did, we read that when she went out into the field to glean, and when Boaz invited her to have lunch with him and his servants, that after she ate and she was satisfied, she set aside something to take home to give to her mother-in-law. So she was looking out after her mother-in-law. And this is where the church comes in, or being part of a community. It's up to us to reach out. Another friend of mine lost his wife earlier this week. I think she died on Sunday. I have sent a message, but I also need to call and pray. And though Naomi felt bitter and lost hope, because of Ruth, she found something to live for. So when you are going through loss, sometimes you think you have nothing to give. But within you, there is wisdom that you can offer to help others, because it was Naomi's wisdom and guidance that helped Ruth to find a husband. Naomi was the one who showed her what to do. And there's so many lessons in that, you know. When you think you're unlovely or cursed because of what has happened to you, there are others who will love you. And when you think because of your losses you have nothing to give, you do have something to give, and don't give up. So Naomi found something to give again. And Ruth, she was in a sense being a mentor to Ruth, and that helped her to find purpose and reason again. And when Ruth eventually had a child, she took the child to Naomi, and the child kind of became Naomi's child. So Naomi was able to give care again. She couldn't have children again, but through Ruth, she was able to now have someone to care for. So sometimes those who are helping you, you will help them. I remember when I visited a friend after she had done surgery. On that visit, my friend ended up helping me, even though she was the sick one. So in loss, if we can find a way to serve. After a time, after a season, can you find a way to serve? In serving, you will find that you will receive your healing. So one is support. Allow yourself to be supported. The next thing could be after you've grieved, or even while you're grieving like Ruth, you can lend support to others. How can you be of service to others? In fact, how can your experience help others? Maybe you are further along the path of grief. Come alongside somebody else who is grieving. Help them to process the funeral service, the different things that come with that situation, because you've been there before. Walk them through, listen to them. So see how you can serve, the lessons you have learned. Sometimes others will talk to you because you've been there. They won't talk to the other person, but they will talk to you because you have been there. So your voice of credibility becomes stronger, and they're able to identify with you. So in your grief, if you are going to win, I said you need the support of others, you need to serve, and stop pushing others away. I don't know if you're like me. Sometimes when things go wrong, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to be by myself. And I guess Naomi was kind of feeling like that. Stop pushing away your help. And don't lose faith in God. Because in spite of all it, God had a plan. Naomi and Ruth became part of the lineage of kings. Ruth's great grandson was King David, who united the tribes of Israel. And Naomi played a part in that. So Ruth was able to love again, to live again, to thrive again. You need to believe that you can thrive again, you can live again, you can love again, even after loss. If it's your husband, you can marry again. You may not want to think like that, but we see that in the story. Ruth was able to marry again, not Naomi, but if you're a young widow, you could love again. This is what happened to Ruth. And in her previous marriage, there was no children. In the second marriage, she gave birth to um, a child. Now, just leaving those tips with you, don't give up, because the story of Ruth begins with tragedy and sadness, but it ends in hope. So, what are the lessons that you can learn from the loss that can be of help to somebody else in this season or another season? Don't reject support. Uh, don't refuse the help. See how you can serve others and support others in this season. And don't give up on God. It's possible to love again. And you can believe that you can get your life back. The book of Ruth is my favorite book in the Bible. And I have learned many lessons from it. Ruth, I mean, she is, wow, an amazing, courageous woman. And all she stands for: kind, supportive, just an amazing woman who was able to set aside her grief to help somebody else, and who was willing to start over and to support someone who wasn't at their best. She's just amazing. But the entire book itself has so many lessons that the more I read it, the more lessons I learn. And one of the recent lessons I learned in just looking back at this, even when you feel you have nothing to give and you're of no use to anybody, someone somewhere will still sacrifice for you and go to bat for you. Yes, that's what Ruth did. And she gave up all to follow this woman. And this woman wasn't even at her best. She was in a state of bitterness, but maybe because of her life before and the kindness she experienced. So sometimes your reputation will precede you. And even when you think you don't have anything to give, that I think is a big part. Part of winning after loss is recognizing that you still have something to give. Just because your loved ones have died doesn't mean that you need to die and stop living. Naomi thought she had nothing to give. But through Ruth, who believed in her, she was able to come back and live a meaningful life. And all along, God had a plan for her. So even when it looks like nothing is happening, God has a plan for your life. Trust Him. And He can turn your mourning into dancing again. I trust that these tips have been helpful and that you will implement them or use it to encourage somebody. Share this episode with somebody, and let's just help each other get through the season of grief and this pandemic. So, with hands across your heart, say after me: there's greatness in me. It's possible to live my dreams, no matter how bad it is or how bad it gets. I'm going to make it with faith, courage, and consistent action. I'm going to make it. It's not over until I win. Ta for now, until next time.